Greetings fellow casters and welcome to Caster's Corner, your guides in the ever-changing landscape of Alestria. I'll be your host once again, the Law YGO, bringing you yet another brew I've been working on for the Daybreak meta. With additional testing, we found that Daybreak's card pool changes a lot, yet not that much. Many decks that were present in previous metas are back, and now that's no longer just limited to the decks of Frostfall. Today, we're jumping back into a strategy from base set and seeing if we can't make something competent out of it. Who needs Eruption? This is Wind Nexus. Starting out with our various wind receivers, we've got ourselves 3 Toxiswarm, 2 P-Gust, and 1 Nemasail. In the long game, Toxiswarm is by far and away the best option we have right now. He's 4 attacks so he can actually swing and take hits. He burns for 1 every time he receives, including on his cast, meaning he inches our way into a go for game position, and he synergizes extremely well with the only good Wind Nexuser there is. P-Gust is the second best thanks to it handling back row reliably, popping something on each receive, which is only held back by its poor stat line. Lastly is the single Nemasail. While the ability to heal back our spirits is a key ability to have access to, Nemasail is by far the worst of the 3 Frostfall heal receivers, where Jatagua has a 4 defense body going for it and Catarant has the recursion and revival of Frost. Nemasail only has 3 attack and 1 defense, making it pitifully easy to get over, but still important to have 1 copy of as an option for our Divine line. Next up is 2 Exaltair, our prime Wind Nexus user. What Exaltair lacks in stats, it more than makes up for with its Nexus effect to burn. The primary issue that Wind Nexus faced in the past was actually sticking a body worth Nexusing onto with a relatively weaker stats. But now with Toxiswarm in the pool, Wind now has a reliable body to stick that can actually survive a turn to get Exaltair up to capitalize off of it. Lastly for the wins is 3 copies of Sorlet, who doubles as a 5 with the number 5 printed on it, as well as being able to out any Elestral with a weak stat. Moving into the off colors now, we've got 3 copies of Funny Bunny and 2 copies of Chicky Chick as our Thunder line, as Rapid at this stage is just the best turn 1 option in the game, and Elichick actually gets us to our Divine lines, which is pretty important for this deck. Lastly for the Elestrals, we've got 2 copies of Spectaris. Spectaris is easily the best Elestral in Daybreak, and it's not hard to see why. Effectively, being a 5 attacker that can suppress anything it battles makes it have way more utility than its Nexus form Viserys. Moving into our rune lines for Invokes, we got 3 copies of Earthquake and 3 copies of Ambrosia, which is fairly standard for most decks at this stage. Next up is our Divines, which is 3 copies of Aeolus and a single copy of Zeus. Aeolus is by far and away the best card in the entire deck because it both grabs whatever wind piece you're missing and sets up a Nexus Spirit to take by casting it with 3 initially. Commonly, if you see Aeolus, you're going to be set up quite effectively for the game because of the raw advantage it provides on its own. Zeus is here as an option to use specifically with Elichick for outing anything with 7 or less attack, as you can cast Elichick for turn to grab Zeus, play Zeus for at least 1 to drop the opponent by 3, and run over it with Chick. Lastly, for the counter rune line, we got our standard staples here. 3 copies of Gorgons, 3 copies of PTA, 3 copies of Shield, and 3 copies of Altar of Stars. Altar picks up all the remaining slack in the Nexus line by giving not only additional utility, but also providing quick Nexusing for specific scenarios, such as Nexusing to P-Gust to pop a back row before it can be live, Nexusing to and from Rabbit to get the additional add up, or the all reliable of Nexusing to Toxiswarm for the burn. As for our Spirit line, we got ourselves 4 Zaptor for our Thunders, 2 Owloon for our Spectaris, 2 Taratlus for our Earthquakes, and then 12 Lycaris to finish out the line. Being completely fair, this line is about as concrete as it gets right now, as realistically you need the full amount of wins to keep your Wind Nexus play online, and anything you need more specifically, like the Taratlus for example for another Earthquake, you can always just Ambrosia back. As for how the deck plays, you're going to try to initially stick a Wind Nexus target, with Toxiswarm being the premium target in most cases, or P-Gust into heavier back row lines. Once you've stuck a Wind for the turn, getting out the Exaltair and immediately starting the burn plan is incredibly strong, especially into slower decks, which are going to be common for the early Daybreak meta. Save Aeolus drops for when you need to play a search target or for when you're ready to go in for the Nexus. Playing it early is going to leave you susceptible to specifically Lavalith, so you'll need to be careful about that for many matchups. Lastly, the only time you should be actively swinging with your wins is when you are completely safe to do so. Shield will put you severely behind tempo since it's critical to stick 2 Wind Elestrals to operate, and Argo being a threat now will only make things far more precarious for attacking into seemingly weaker Elestrals. As for the side deck, Currently, there are a few really great options to cater towards more aggressive matchups, which are definitely your weak point. Tsunami and Water Spirits would be the immediate go-to in my opinion to stop massive large attack swings, but in addition to that, single target removal tools are also a premium, like Boombat and Resting, both of which cover different scenarios as well, with Boombat clearing large spirit targets with ease and Resting handling wider boards without taking the normal cast. Lastly for my recommendations is Dense Fog, as we appear to be entering a meta where heavy suppression is premium, which will result in heavier play rates of Gorgons, which is already maxed out in most players' lists, and Dense Fog as a secondary. It's also going to be a common sight for any deck running Spectaris to have this in the side, as you'll already have committed the Lunar Spirits for the initial Spectaris. With that in mind, that's the basics to win Nexus. While I don't believe that this deck is going to stick around in the long term as the meta solidifies and speeds up, for these early experimentation stages, this deck is going to absolutely devour slower strategies just by playing on a different axis than most. Let us know your thoughts on the strategy down below, and until then, keep your spirit decks full and keep your counter runes live. Take care.